We need that trust money for the wedding. Stop being selfish." Mom's voice cut through the phone like a blade, sharp and demanding. I sat in my empty house in Phoenix, Arizona, still wearing the same black dress from yesterday, still feeling the weight of the dirt on my hands from filling in my son's grave myself. I said quietly, "I understand. My name is Allison, and I'm 35 years old. 2 days ago, I buried my 9-year-old son completely alone while my parents and sister celebrated her engagement party across town. They knew about the funeral. They chose the party instead." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched long enough that I wondered if Mom had hung up. Then she cleared her throat. "Good. Patricia needs $12,000 for the catering deposit, and we figured Tyler's trust fund can cover it. You're the executor, so just write the check." Tyler, my beautiful, brilliant boy who loved dinosaurs and could recite every fact about velociraptors, who fought leukemia for 3 years with more courage than most adults show in a lifetime, who died holding my hand while asking if Grandma and Grandpa were coming to visit. "The lawyer will need a few days to process everything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "A few days? Allison, the venue needs payment by Friday or Patricia loses her spot. Can't you just transfer the money from your account and get reimbursed later?" I closed my eyes, remembering how I'd begged them to postpone Patricia's engagement party. Just one day. Just to be there when their grandson was laid to rest. Mom had clicked her tongue and said, "Honey, Tyler wouldn't want us to be sad. He'd want us to celebrate family happiness." Family happiness. While I shoveled dirt onto my child's coffin with my bare hands because the funeral home workers had already left. "I'll take care of it," I told her. "Perfect. And Allison? Try to focus on the positive. Patricia's wedding will be a fresh start for all of us. We need to put this difficult time behind us and move forward." The call ended. I set the phone down and walked to Tyler's bedroom, where his dinosaur posters still covered the walls and his favorite stuffed triceratops sat on the unmade bed. We'd been living in this house for the past year, ever since I'd moved back to Phoenix to be closer to family during Tyler's treatment. What a mistake that had been. My parents lived 20 minutes away in Scottsdale, in the big house Dad bought after his accounting firm took off. Patricia, my younger sister by 3 years, lived in their pool house while planning her dream wedding to a real estate developer named Brad. When Tyler was first diagnosed, they'd seemed supportive. They visited the hospital a few times, brought flowers, said all the right words about being there for us. But as months turned to years, and Tyler's condition worsened, their visits became less frequent. They were busy people, after all. Dad had clients to manage. Mom had her garden club and book society. Patricia had wedding venues to tour and dresses to try on. The breaking point came 6 months ago when Tyler was back in the hospital for another round of chemotherapy. He'd been asking for Grandpa to come read him dinosaur books like he used to. I called Dad's office 3 times that day. His secretary kept saying he was in meetings. That evening, I saw Patricia's Instagram story, a family dinner at their favorite steakhouse. Mom, Dad, Patricia, and Brad, all smiling over expensive wine and perfectly plated food. The timestamp showed it was posted while Tyler was throwing up from his treatment, asking why his grandparents didn't love him anymore. I should have known then what I know now. When it came to choosing between convenience and commitment, they would always take the easy path. Tyler's trust fund had been established by my ex-husband's family after his death in a car accident 4 years ago. $50,000, meant to secure Tyler's future. College, maybe a house someday, whatever he might need. When Tyler was diagnosed, I'd been grateful for that safety net, even though I never touched a penny of it. My job as a nurse at Phoenix Children's Hospital provided enough for us to get by, and I wanted that money to remain Tyler's. Now Tyler was gone, and legally, as his mother and the executor of his estate, the money belonged to me. But they didn't know what I'd already done with it. 3 weeks ago, when Tyler's doctors told me his time was running short, I'd made a decision. I called the lawyer who managed the trust and asked about charitable giving. Could the money be donated in Tyler's name? Of course, he'd said. Just needed my signature as executor. I'd spent hours researching children's cancer organizations, reading about their programs and impact. I wanted Tyler's legacy to help other kids fighting the same battle he'd fought so bravely. The paperwork was completed 2 weeks ago. Every penny of that $50,000 was already donated to the Children's Cancer Research Alliance, with a memorial fund established in Tyler's name. The irony was beautiful. While my family planned their party instead of supporting their grandson in his final days, I was ensuring Tyler's memory would live on in a way that actually mattered. I walked to my kitchen and poured a cup of coffee, thinking about tomorrow's family dinner. Mom had called it a healing gathering, where we could process our grief together and discuss Patricia's wedding plans. She'd insisted I come, despite my protests that I wasn't ready to be around people yet, but I would go. I would sit at their table, listen to their wedding talk, and wait for the perfect moment to share what I'd already done with Tyler's trust fund. The look on their faces would be worth every moment of pain they'd caused. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Mom says you're being super generous with Tyler's money. You're the best sister ever." I smiled for the first time since the funeral. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house in Scottsdale, passing the cemetery where Tyler rested under a small headstone I'd chosen myself. No one had offered to help with those arrangements either. They were too busy sampling wedding cakes. The house looked exactly the same as always. Perfectly manicured lawn, expensive cars in the driveway, warm light spilling from the windows. A picture of suburban success that hid so much ugliness underneath. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering strength. Inside that house were the people who should have loved Tyler unconditionally, who should have dropped everything to be with him in his final weeks. Instead, they'd treated his illness like an inconvenience, his death like an interruption to their important plans. Dad opened the door before I could knock, wrapping me in what felt like a performance of a hug. "Allison, sweetheart, we're so glad you could make it. Your mother's made your favorite pot roast." My favorite pot roast, as if food could make up for abandoning their grandson. The dining room was set with Mom's best china, the kind she only used for special occasions. Apparently, discussing how to spend my dead son's money qualified as special. Patricia and Brad were already seated, Patricia practically glowing with excitement, Brad checking his phone with the kind of boredom that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "There she is." Patricia jumped up to hug me. "I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral. The appointment with the florist was scheduled months ago, and you know how hard it is to get time with the good vendors." The appointment with the florist. While I was lowering my son's body into the ground, my sister was choosing centerpieces. Mom emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of perfectly sliced roast, her face bright with the kind of forced cheer she'd perfected over the years. I thought we could have a nice family dinner and talk about moving forward. We've all been through so much these past few years. We'd all been through so much, as if she'd been the one sleeping in hospital chairs and holding her child's hand through endless treatments. I took my seat at the table, the same chair I'd occupied during family dinners throughout my childhood. Tyler used to sit next to me when we visited, asking endless questions about everything and making everyone laugh with his dinosaur impressions. The empty space beside me felt huge. "So," Dad said, cutting into his roast, "your mother mentioned you're willing to help with wedding expenses. That's very generous, especially considering everything you've been dealing with." "Tyler would want us to celebrate happiness," Mom added quickly. "He was such a joyful little boy. He'd want his money to go towards something beautiful." I almost choked on my water. Tyler would want his money to help other sick children, not fund a party for people who couldn't be bothered to attend his funeral. Patricia leaned forward eagerly. "I've been thinking about the most meaningful way to honor Tyler at the wedding. Maybe a small memorial table with his photo? Something tasteful that doesn't bring down the mood too much." A memorial table. A photo. After abandoning him completely, she wanted to use his memory as wedding decoration. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully. Brad looked up from his phone for the first time. How much are we talking about anyway? The trust fund amount? There it was. The real reason for this dinner. Not grief, not healing, not family unity. Money. 50,000, Dad said proudly, as if he'd contributed to it somehow. Tyler's father's family set it up after the accident. Smart investment. The boy won't need it now, so it might as well go towards something that brings the family joy. The boy won't need it now. Tyler had a name. He was their grandson. But to them, he'd become nothing more than a source of funding for Patricia's perfect day. I actually have some wonderful news about that, I said, setting down my fork. I was able to make arrangements that I think Tyler would really love. Patricia clapped her hands together. Did you already transfer it to the wedding account? Oh my gosh, this means we can upgrade the band. I found this amazing group that plays at celebrity weddings. Not exactly, I said, watching their faces carefully. I donated it to the Children's Cancer Research Alliance. Every penny. In Tyler's name. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork clattered to her plate. Dad's face went completely white. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You what? Mom whispered. I established a memorial fund in Tyler's honor, I continued calmly. The money will go toward research that might help other children fighting cancer. It seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing? Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. Allison, that was my money. That was for my wedding. Actually, it was Tyler's money, I corrected. And now it's helping children who are going through what Tyler went through. Children whose families stand by them. Dad found his voice, though it shook with rage. You can't do this. We'll contest it. We'll get lawyers involved. You had no right to make that decision without consulting us. I had every right, I said quietly. I was Tyler's mother, and the executor of his estate. The donation was completed legally 2 weeks ago. The money's gone. Mom's carefully composed mask finally cracked. How could you be so selfish? Patricia has been planning this wedding for a year. Do you know how much everything costs? How many deposits we've already paid? Selfish. They were calling me selfish for honoring my dead son's memory instead of funding their party. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided your grandson's funeral wasn't important enough to attend, I said, standing up from the table. The room erupted. Patricia was crying, Brad was cursing under his breath, Dad was threatening legal action, and Mom was listing all the ways I'd disappointed the family over the years. But their anger only proved what I already knew. They cared more about money than they'd ever cared about Tyler. I walked toward the door, leaving them to their rage. Tomorrow would bring phone calls from lawyers, threats, demands to reverse what couldn't be reversed. But tonight, I would go home to Tyler's room and tell his stuffed triceratops about the children who would live because of his legacy. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I sat in lawyer Jonathan Pierce's office downtown, listening to him explain why my family's threats were worthless. The donation was executed properly and legally, he said, reviewing the paperwork spread across his mahogany desk. As Tyler's mother and the court-appointed executor of his estate, you had full authority to make charitable distributions. There's no legal avenue for them to pursue. I nodded, though I'd expected as much. The real satisfaction wasn't in the legality of what I'd done, but in the principle. Tyler's money was helping children who actually needed it, not funding a party for people who'd abandoned him. My phone had been ringing constantly since that dinner. Mom called every few hours, alternating between tears and fury. Patricia sent long, rambling text messages about how I'd ruined her life and destroyed the family. Dad left voicemails threatening to cut me out of his will, as if I cared about his money after seeing how little family loyalty meant to them. But the call that surprised me came that morning from my Aunt Grace, Dad's older sister who lived in Denver. She'd heard about Tyler's death through the family grapevine, though no one had bothered to tell her about the funeral. "I'm flying in this weekend," she'd said. "We need to talk." Grace had always been the black sheep of Dad's family, the one who spoke uncomfortable truths at family gatherings and refused to play along with their polite pretenses. She'd moved away from Phoenix 30 years ago and only visited for major holidays, usually leaving early after some argument with my parents about their priorities. When Tyler was younger, Grace had been one of his favorite relatives. She sent him books about dinosaurs, called to hear about his latest discoveries, and genuinely listened when he talked about his interests. After his diagnosis, she'd flown in several times to visit him in the hospital, bringing puzzles and games to help pass the long treatment days. She was one of the few family members who'd actually cared about Tyler as a person, not just as an obligation. I spent the rest of the week ignoring my parents' increasingly desperate calls and focusing on work. The hospital was a welcome distraction, filled with colleagues who'd actually supported me during Tyler's illness. My supervisor had given me bereavement leave, but I'd requested to come back early. Staying busy helped keep the grief manageable. On Friday evening, I picked Grace up from the airport. She looked exactly the same as always. Silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, carrying a single bag despite planning to stay for a week. At 62, she had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent 30 years as a high school principal. "How are you holding up?" she asked as we drove toward my house. "Better than expected," I admitted. "Angry, but better." "Good. Anger is useful. It means you haven't given up on expecting people to do better." We drove in comfortable silence for a while. Grace had always understood that not every moment needed to be filled with words, a trait that had made her one of Tyler's favorite visitors. She could sit quietly with him during treatments, reading books or working on puzzles, without constantly asking how he felt or trying to cheer him up with forced positivity. At home, I made coffee and showed her Tyler's room, which I hadn't had the strength to change yet. She picked up his favorite stuffed triceratops, holding it carefully. "He loved this thing," she said softly. "He told me its name was Herbert and that it was a herbivore, which meant it was gentle and wouldn't hurt anyone." I smiled, remembering. "He wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up. He said he was going to discover a new species of dinosaur and name it after me." Grace set Herbert back on the bed and turned to face me. "I heard about what happened at the funeral and what you did with the trust fund." I braced myself for another lecture about family obligation and forgiveness. Instead, she smiled. "I'm proud of you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't remember the last time any family member had said they were proud of me for anything. "Your parents called me, you know," she continued. "They wanted me to talk sense into you, to help them figure out how to reverse the donation. They seem to think I have some influence over your decisions." "What did you tell them?" "That Tyler's money should honor Tyler's memory, and that if they'd wanted a say in how it was spent, they should have acted like grandparents while he was alive." We sat in Tyler's room until late that night, sharing stories about him and talking about the way my parents had changed over the years. Grace had watched their gradual transformation from the caring people they used to be into the self-absorbed individuals they'd become. "It started when your father's business took off," she said. "Success changed them. They got used to being the center of their own world, having everything revolve around their plans and priorities. Other people became supporting characters in their story instead of having their own value." That description fit perfectly. Tyler and I had been supporting characters in their narrative, expected to be grateful for whatever attention they spared us, and never to inconvenience them with our needs. "The thing is," Grace continued, "they still see themselves as good people. They'll never understand why what they did was wrong, because in their minds, they're the victims here. You're the ungrateful daughter who ruined Patricia's wedding." She was right. Even now, they probably thought they were the wronged party. They'd convinced themselves that attending an engagement party was more important than supporting their grandson's final goodbye, and nothing would ever make them see how twisted that priority had been. But I was done caring what they thought. On Saturday, Grace came with me to visit Tyler's grave. I'd been there every day since the funeral, bringing fresh flowers and telling him about my day. Today, I brought a photo from the Children's Cancer Research Alliance, showing some of the kids who would benefit from his memorial fund. "Look, Tyler," I said, kneeling beside his headstone. "Your money is going to help these children get better, just like you always wanted to help people." Grace stood quietly beside me, her hand on my shoulder. For the first time since Tyler's death, I felt like someone in my family truly understood what I'd lost and what I was trying to honor. Later that evening, as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset, Grace asked the question I'd been dreading. "What happens now? With your parents, I mean. Are you planning to reconcile?" I thought about Tyler asking for his grandparents in the hospital. I thought about the empty funeral service. I thought about their immediate concern for wedding money instead of grief support. "No," I said finally. "Some things can't be forgiven, and some people don't deserve the effort." Grace nodded approvingly. "Good. You've got a backbone after all." Grace stayed for a full week, and her presence gave me the strength I needed to face what came next. On the day before she left, my parents showed up at my house unannounced. I was in the garden, planting marigolds in the small memorial space I'd created for Tyler, when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Grace was inside making lunch, and I could hear her moving around the kitchen as footsteps approached. "Allison." Dad's voice was sharp, businesslike, the same tone he used with difficult clients. "We need to talk." I didn't look up from the flowers. Tyler had loved marigolds because they were bright orange like his favorite dinosaur book cover. "I don't think we do." "Yes, we do." Mom's voice was strained, like she'd been crying. "This has gone far enough. You're destroying this family over money that could have brought us all together." I finally stood, brushing dirt from my hands. They looked older than I remembered, more worn down. Patricia stood behind them, her face puffy and red. Brad was conspicuously absent. "Where's Brad?" I asked Patricia. She burst into fresh tears. "He postponed the wedding. He says we need to figure out our finances before we can plan a future together. It's all your fault." I felt a small stab of satisfaction. So there were consequences for Brad, too. Consequences that were already rippling through their perfect plans. "The venue canceled our reservation," Mom continued, her voice rising. "The caterer is keeping our deposit, but won't do the event without full payment. Patricia's dress has been ordered and can't be returned. Do you know how much money we're losing because of your selfishness?" Grace appeared in my doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at my parents with the same expression she probably used on unruly teenagers back when she was still teaching. "Grace." Dad's tone shifted, becoming falsely warm. "I'm glad you're here. Maybe you can help Allison see reason." "I can see just fine," Grace said coolly. "The question is whether you can." Patricia stepped forward, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Aunt Grace, you don't understand. This was going to be the perfect wedding. I've been planning it for 2 years. Everyone's already asked for time off work, sent in their RSVPs. I have to tell 200 people that it's canceled because my sister decided to throw money away on strangers instead of helping her own family." "Strangers," I repeated slowly. "You mean children with cancer." "You know what I mean," Patricia snapped. "Kids you don't even know, who have nothing to do with our family. Meanwhile, your actual family is falling apart, and you don't care." The audacity was breathtaking. They were angry at me for caring about sick children instead of Patricia's party, and they genuinely saw themselves as the victims in this situation. "Tell me," I said, looking directly at Mom. What did you do the day Tyler died? Mom's face flushed. That's not fair. We were processing our own grief. You went shopping for bridesmaid shoes, I said quietly. I called you from the hospital at 3 p.m. to tell you Tyler was gone, and you said you'd call me back because you were at the mall with Patricia. That's not how it happened, Dad protested. It's exactly how it happened. And when I called back 3 hours later, crying and asking if you could come over, Mom said she had book club and would see me later in the week. The silence stretched between us. Grace watched my parents with disgust, while Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Your grandson died, and you went to book club, I continued. You skipped his funeral for an engagement party. You never once asked how I was holding up, never offered to help with arrangements, never even sent a card. But now you're here demanding his trust fund money for Patricia's wedding. We're grieving too, Mom said weakly. No, you're not. You're inconvenienced. There's a difference. Patricia's tears turned to anger. Fine. You want to punish us? You want to destroy my happiness because you're miserable? Well, congratulations. You won. Brad thinks I'm financially irresponsible now. He's questioning whether I can be a good partner if I can't manage money properly. The wedding is off. Probably forever. I should have felt sorry for her. Part of me expected to feel guilty for the collateral damage to her relationship. Instead, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Maybe Brad's right to question your priorities, I said. Maybe he realized that someone who chooses party planning over family funerals isn't the partner he wants. Patricia's face went white with rage. How dare you? How dare you judge my relationship when you couldn't even keep Tyler's father alive? The words hit like a physical slap. Even Grace gasped. Dad grabbed Patricia's arm, but it was too late. Patricia, that's enough, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I stared at my sister. This woman who had just blamed me for my husband's death in a car accident, and felt something inside me break completely. Not the clean break of sudden trauma, but the slow, grinding destruction of the last threads holding a relationship together. Get off my property, I said quietly. Allison, she didn't mean it, Mom started. Get off my property now, or I'm calling the police. Grace stepped up beside me, her presence solid and supportive. You heard her. Leave. Dad opened his mouth to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him I was serious. He took Mom's arm and steered her toward the car. Patricia followed, still crying, throwing one last desperate plea over her shoulder. This isn't over, Allison. We're family. Family doesn't abandon each other like this. I watched them drive away, feeling lighter than I had in months. They were right about one thing. Family doesn't abandon each other. That's exactly why I'd cut them out of my life. Grace put her arm around my shoulders. Are you okay? I think so, I said, and realized I meant it. That evening, Grace and I sat on my back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, Tyler's favorite colors. There's something I haven't told you, Grace said eventually, about your parents and Patricia. I looked at her curiously. They called me 2 months ago, right after Tyler's diagnosis got worse. They wanted advice about how to handle the situation. My stomach tightened. What kind of advice? They were worried about how much time and money Tyler's care was taking. They wondered if it might be better for everyone if you moved Tyler to a facility, somewhere with professional care, so you could focus on getting your life back together. The words took a moment to sink in. They wanted me to put Tyler in a hospice. Not exactly hospice. More like long-term care. Somewhere he could be comfortable while you figured out your next steps. I felt sick. While I was fighting for every possible treatment, every chance to give Tyler more time, my parents were planning ways to remove him from their lives entirely. I told them they were heartless, Grace continued. I said if they couldn't support their daughter and grandson during the hardest time of their lives, they didn't deserve to be called family. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. That's why they'd pulled away even more in Tyler's final months. Not because they were busy or overwhelmed, but because they saw him as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a child to be loved. After Grace left for Denver, I threw myself into work with renewed purpose. The pediatric oncology ward at Phoenix Children's Hospital had been my second home during Tyler's treatment, and now it became my refuge. The children there reminded me daily why Tyler's memorial fund mattered more than any wedding. 2 weeks after my family's confrontation, I received a call that changed everything. "Miss Allison?" The voice was young, uncertain. "This is Jennifer from the Children's Cancer Research Alliance. I work in donor relations." I'd been expecting some kind of follow-up about the memorial fund, probably routine paperwork or a thank you letter. "We received your donation in Tyler's name," Jennifer continued. "It's incredible, and we're so grateful. But I'm calling because something unusual has happened." My heart skipped. Had my parents somehow found a way to contest the donation after all? "What kind of unusual?" "Well, we've been getting calls, lots of calls. People claiming to be Tyler's grandparents and aunt, saying the donation was made without proper family consent. They're demanding we return the money to them directly." I sank into my kitchen chair. Of course they were. When legal challenges failed, my family had decided to try emotional manipulation on a charity organization. "They can't do that legally," I said. "I was the executor." "Oh, we know that. Our legal team confirmed everything was proper, but the calls are getting more aggressive." Yesterday, a woman claiming to be Tyler's grandmother called and said the donation was made by someone having a mental breakdown who wasn't competent to make financial decisions. My face burned with humiliation and rage. They were attacking my mental health to try to get Tyler's money. They were telling strangers that I was unstable, incompetent, unfit to make decisions about my own son's legacy. "The thing is," Jennifer continued hesitantly, "they're also claiming that you stole the money from them. That it was meant for a family emergency and you diverted it to charity to hurt them. The grandmother was crying on the phone, saying her other granddaughter's life was being destroyed because of this." I closed my eyes. Mom's performance had probably been worthy of an Oscar. "I need to be clear about something," I said firmly. "Those people are not Tyler's family. Tyler's biological father died 4 years ago, and his family established the trust. My parents and sister abandoned Tyler during his illness and skipped his funeral. They have no legal or moral claim to his money." There was silence on the other end, then a relieved sigh. "Thank you for clarifying. We deal with family disputes sometimes, but this felt different, more malicious." Because it is malicious. They're not grieving grandparents trying to honor Tyler's memory. They're people who want money for a wedding and are willing to lie to a children's charity to get it. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen trembling with rage. It wasn't enough for them to abandon Tyler and attack me. Now they were harassing the very organization trying to help children like him. They were so desperate for Patricia's wedding money that they'd try to manipulate grieving families and overworked charity employees. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I called a local news reporter. Melissa Torres worked for Channel 12's investigative team, and I'd seen her stories about charity fraud and family exploitation. She agreed to meet me for coffee, intrigued by my brief description of the situation. "So, let me understand this," Melissa said, reviewing the notes she'd taken during our hour-long conversation. "Your parents and sister skipped your son's funeral to attend an engagement party, then demanded his trust fund money for wedding expenses. When you donated it to Children's Cancer Research instead, they're now harassing the charity and claiming you're mentally incompetent." "That's exactly right." Melissa shook her head. "I've covered some awful family disputes, but this is particularly cruel. The charity angle makes it newsworthy, especially if they're making false claims about mental competency to try to reverse a legal donation. What would a story accomplish? Public accountability. Sometimes people behave better when they know their actions might become public knowledge. And it would protect the charity from further harassment by clarifying the legal situation. I thought about Tyler, about the children in the cancer ward who needed research funding more than Patricia needed a perfect wedding. I thought about my parents' willingness to attack a charity helping sick kids. Do it, I said. The story aired the following Thursday evening. Melissa had done her homework, interviewing Jennifer from the charity, confirming the legal status of the donation, and getting statements from hospital staff about Tyler's illness and my dedication as his mother. She didn't use my family's names, referring to them only as relatives who skipped the child's funeral to attend a social event. But anyone who knew us would recognize the details. The story presented the facts clearly. A mother who lost her son to cancer donated his trust fund to help other children, and family members were now harassing the charity to try to get the money for personal use. The legal expert Melissa interviewed called it morally reprehensible and confirmed that the donation was irreversible. My phone started ringing before the story finished airing. The first call was from my supervisor at the hospital, expressing support and outrage on my behalf. The second was from Grace in Denver, who'd seen the story online and was proud of me for standing up to them publicly. The third call was from Patricia, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. How could you do this to us? How could you go on the news and make us look like monsters? Do you know what this is going to do to Dad's business? To my reputation? I told the truth, I said calmly. If that makes you look like monsters, maybe examine your behavior instead of blaming me for reporting it. We're going to sue you for defamation. We're going to sue the TV station. This is character assassination. Good luck with that, I said, and hung up. The fourth call was from Dad, his voice cold and controlled. You've crossed a line, Allison. Going to the media, airing private family business on television, making us look like criminals. This ends now. You're right, I said. It does end now. Don't call me again. You're making a mistake. Family is forever, and someday you'll need us. Don't burn bridges you might have to cross later. I thought about Tyler asking for his grandparents in the hospital. I thought about filling in his grave alone while they celebrated across town. I thought about them trying to convince a charity that I was mentally incompetent. I don't need people who would abandon a dying child, I said. And I don't want bridges to people who would harass a children's cancer charity. Goodbye, Dad. I blocked all their numbers that night, feeling like I was finally free to grieve Tyler properly without their demands and manipulations poisoning my healing process. The news story had consequences I hadn't anticipated. Over the next week, I received dozens of calls and emails from people who'd seen the report and wanted to share their own stories of family betrayal during times of crisis. Parents who'd been abandoned by relatives when their children became ill. Spouses who'd discovered their partner's true character during medical emergencies. Adult children whose parents had shown their real priorities when serious problems arose. But the most surprising call came from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My ex-sister-in-law, Diane, Tyler's father's sister. I saw the news story, she said, her voice tight with emotion. I can't believe they did that to you and Tyler. Kevin would be furious. Kevin had been my husband, Tyler's father, killed in a car accident when Tyler was 5. His family had been devastated by the loss, but they'd stayed connected to Tyler and me, treating us as permanent family despite the tragedy. The trust fund had been their idea. Their way of ensuring Tyler's future was secure. I need to tell you something, Diane continued. About the trust fund. There's something you don't know. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Kevin's parents didn't just set up the original $50,000. They've been adding to it every year on Tyler's birthday. The account has over $80,000 in it now. I nearly dropped the phone. What? They never told you because they didn't want you to feel pressured to use it, or to worry that they thought you couldn't provide for Tyler. But every year, on his birthday, they'd add $5,000. They called it his future fund. My mind raced. If there was still money in the trust fund, then my parents' harassment of the charity was even more pointless than I'd thought. But more than that, it meant Tyler's memory was protected by people who'd truly loved him. People who'd thought about his future even after losing their own son. The thing is, Diane continued, Mom and Dad have been calling me since your parents started making threats. They want to make sure Tyler's memory is protected and that you have support. They've asked me to tell you that whatever you decide to do with the remaining money, they'll support completely. I started crying, overwhelmed by the contrast between Kevin's family's quiet, consistent love and my own family's selfish demands. There's more, Diane said gently. They want to establish a larger memorial fund in Tyler's name. They're willing to contribute another $100,000 if you'd like to create something more substantial. A scholarship program, maybe, or funding for a specific research project. Through my tears, I managed to say, Tyler would love that. He always wanted to help people. We know. That's why we're doing it. After I hung up with Diane, I sat in Tyler's room processing this new information. While my parents had been harassing a charity over $50,000 that was already spent, Tyler's real family had been quietly building a legacy that could make a genuine difference in the fight against childhood cancer. I called Jennifer at the Children's Cancer Research Alliance to discuss the expanded memorial fund possibilities. She was excited about the potential for a comprehensive program in Tyler's name, something that could fund both research and family support services. With that level of funding, she said, we could create the Tyler Memorial Program for Pediatric Cancer Research. It would be one of our largest named funds, supporting multiple research projects and providing grants for families dealing with treatment costs. It was perfect. Tyler's name would live on in a way that honored everything he'd been. Brave, kind, determined to fight, and caring about others even when he was suffering himself. That evening, as I was researching pediatric cancer programs online, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Patricia standing on my porch, alone this time, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. I'm not here to fight, she said immediately, holding up her hands. I'm not here to demand money or make threats. I just want to talk. I studied her face. She looked genuinely exhausted, her usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and tired eyes. 5 minutes, I said. She sat on my couch like she was afraid it might collapse under her. For a long moment, she didn't speak, just stared at her hands. The engagement is off, she said finally. Not postponed. Off. Brad says he can't marry someone who would harass a children's charity for money. He says it showed him who I really am, and he doesn't like what he sees. I waited, not sure if she wanted sympathy or was building up to another attack. I've been thinking about Tyler, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. About the funeral. About what we did. What you chose to do, I corrected. What I chose to do, she agreed. I keep trying to justify it to myself, to find a way to make it not as bad as it was. But I can't. There's no excuse for missing your nephew's funeral to plan a party. I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, but I pushed it down. Patricia was skilled at saying what people wanted to hear when it served her interests. I don't know how to fix this, she said, tears starting to flow. I don't know how to take back what we did, or how to make up for abandoning you when you needed family most. I don't even know if I'm a good enough person to deserve forgiveness. You're not, I said quietly. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but nodded. I know. You're not a good enough person to deserve forgiveness, and I'm not a generous enough person to give it. What you did to Tyler, what you did to me, what you tried to do to the charity, those things don't get erased by an apology. Patricia was crying harder now, but she didn't argue or defend herself. I destroyed my relationship with Brad because I couldn't let go of the idea that Tyler's money belonged to me somehow, she said. I convinced myself that you were being vindictive instead of honoring your son's memory. I was so focused on what I was losing that I never thought about what you'd already lost. I sat across from her, watching this woman who had been my sister for 32 years, and felt nothing but emptiness where love used to be. "You're right that you can't fix this," I said. "Some things can't be fixed. Some relationships can't be repaired. Tyler needed his family, and his family chose a party instead. I needed support and got demands for money instead. You showed me who you really are, and I believe you." Patricia stood to leave, pausing at my door. "I know this probably doesn't matter now, but I am sorry. Not because I lost Brad, or because the family is angry at me for the news story. I'm sorry because Tyler was a beautiful little boy who deserved better from all of us." After she left, I walked to Tyler's room and picked up Herbert the Triceratops. Patricia was right about one thing. Tyler had deserved better, but he'd gotten the best I could give him, and now his legacy would help other children get the support and research funding they needed. That was enough. It had to be enough. 3 months after the news story aired, I received a call that would complete Tyler's legacy in ways I'd never imagined. "Allison, this is Dr. Robert Chen from the National Pediatric Cancer Institute," the voice on the phone said. "I'm calling about the Tyler Memorial Program. I'd been working with the Children's Cancer Research Alliance to establish the expanded Memorial Fund using the additional money from Kevin's parents. The program was set to launch the following month with enough funding to support research projects and family assistance programs. We've been following the development of Tyler's Memorial Fund," Dr. Chen continued, "and we'd like to propose something unprecedented. The Institute wants to partner with the Alliance to create the first nationally funded pediatric cancer research center named after a patient advocate." My hands started shaking. "I don't understand." Tyler's story has resonated throughout the medical community. A 9-year-old boy whose trust fund became a catalyst for one of the largest family-supported research initiatives we've seen. We want to establish the Tyler Research Center, with full funding for a dedicated team of researchers working specifically on the type of leukemia Tyler fought. I sank into my kitchen chair, overwhelmed. Tyler's name wasn't just going to help a few children. It was going to be attached to a research center that could change the survival rates for kids with his exact diagnosis. The total commitment would be $5 million over 10 years, Dr. Chen explained. The Institute will provide the majority of funding, but we'd like the Tyler Memorial Program to serve as the community liaison. You'd be on the advisory board, helping direct family support services and ensuring the research stays connected to patient advocacy. After I hung up, I sat in Tyler's room holding Herbert and trying to process what had just happened. My brilliant, brave boy who'd asked so many questions about dinosaurs and science was going to have a research center bearing his name. Children who received Tyler's diagnosis in the future would have treatment options Tyler never had, funded by a program that started with his trust money. The irony was beautiful and devastating. My parents had been so focused on $50,000 for a wedding that they'd missed seeing what that money could become when used with purpose instead of selfishness. That afternoon, I called Grace to share the news. She cried on the phone, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Tyler's legacy had grown into. "He'd be so proud," she said through her tears. "He always wanted to help people, and now he's going to help children for generations to come." 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected visitor at work. I was checking on patients in the pediatric ward when the unit clerk told me someone was asking for me at the nurse's station. It was Mom. She looked older than when I'd seen her 3 months ago, more fragile somehow. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. Wrinkled clothes, gray roots showing in her dyed hair, makeup that couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "Allison," she said hesitantly, "could we talk somewhere private?" I led her to an empty family consultation room, the same type of room where Tyler and I had received countless updates about his treatment progress. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I heard about the research center," she said, not meeting my eyes. "About Tyler's name being on it." I waited, not helping her find words. "I also heard that there was more money in the trust fund than we knew about. that Kevin's parents had been contributing to it. Yes, I said simply. So when we were asking for the money, there was actually enough for both Tyler's memorial and Patricia's wedding. I stared at her, amazed that she still didn't understand. No, Mom. There was never enough money for both, because Tyler's memorial was always the only appropriate use for Tyler's money. She flinched but continued. Your father's business is struggling. The news story brought attention we didn't want. Some of his clients have stopped using his firm because they don't want to be associated with people who would abandon their grandson. Good, I thought but didn't say. Patricia moved back in with us after Brad broke the engagement. She's been depressed, barely leaving her room. The wedding vendors are keeping their deposits, and we're out almost $20,000 between the dress, venue, and other expenses. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no satisfaction, just emptiness where family love used to live. Your father and I have been talking, Mom continued, her voice barely above a whisper. We know we made mistakes. We know we hurt you and Tyler. We're hoping that maybe, with time, we could find a way to rebuild our relationship. Why now? I asked. Why are you here now, after 3 months of silence? Her facade cracked slightly. Because we've lost everything that mattered to us except you. Patricia's wedding was going to be our moment of pride, our chance to show everyone how successful our family was. Dad's business was thriving. We had money and status and respect in the community. Now it's all gone. And you think I can fix it for you? I think family should support each other during difficult times, she said, but the words sounded rehearsed. I stood up, done with the conversation. You're right that family should support each other during difficult times. Tyler was your family during the most difficult time of his life, and you abandoned him. I was your family when I was grieving the loss of my child, and you demanded money from me. Now you're facing consequences for your choices, and suddenly you remember what family means. We're sorry, Mom said desperately. We're truly, deeply sorry for everything. I believe you're sorry, I said. Sorry that your actions had consequences. Sorry that people found out what you're really like. Sorry that you lost your comfortable life. But you're not sorry for what you did to Tyler, because you still don't understand what you did wrong. I walked toward the door, then paused. Tyler's research center will be officially announced next month. There will be a ceremony, media coverage, recognition for his legacy. Don't come. Don't contact me about it. Don't try to be part of something you had no hand in creating. Mom started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone realizes they've lost something permanently. You're our daughter, she said. Tyler was our grandson. We love you both. No, I said quietly. You love the idea of us when it's convenient for you. Tyler needed grandparents who would show up, and I needed parents who would support me. You proved that love isn't what drives your choices. Self-interest is. The Tyler Research Center announcement was held at Phoenix Children's Hospital on a sunny Thursday morning in February. The ceremony took place in the same conference room where Tyler and I had attended so many meetings with his treatment team, now transformed with banners and displays, showcasing the research the center would fund. Dr. Chen introduced the program to an audience of medical professionals, hospital administrators, and local media. Jennifer from the Children's Cancer Research Alliance spoke about the power of memorial giving to transform grief into hope. Kevin's parents, Tyler's real grandparents, sat in the front row with tears of pride in their eyes. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd of people who had gathered to honor my son's memory and felt a peace I hadn't experienced since before his diagnosis. Tyler used to ask me if the treatments were working, I began. He wanted to know if the medicine was making him better, if the research doctors were learning things that would help him and other kids like him. I always told him yes, that every day he fought was helping doctors understand how to win the war against his disease. I paused, thinking about those hospital room conversations, about Tyler's determination to be brave because he thought it would help other children. Tyler never got to see the research he contributed to during his treatment bear fruit in his own recovery. But today, his legacy will fund the exact type of research he believed in. The Tyler Research Center will focus specifically on the form of acute lymphoblastic leukemia that took Tyler's life, with the goal of improving survival rates and quality of life for children facing this diagnosis. The applause was warm and sustained. In the audience, I could see Kevin's parents holding hands, Grace wiping away tears, and several of Tyler's former nurses from the oncology ward smiling through their emotions. The center represents the truth about Tyler's character, I continued. He was brave, curious, determined, and caring. Even at 9 years old, he understood that fighting his disease wasn't just about his own survival. It was about contributing to knowledge that could save other children. This research center will embody those values for years to come. After the ceremony, as people mingled and viewed displays about the center's planned research projects, Grace approached me with a concerned expression. "There are some people outside asking to speak with you," she said quietly. "They say they're Tyler's grandparents." My parents had come after all, despite my explicit request that they stay away. Through the window, I could see them standing in the hospital parking lot with Patricia, all three looking uncertain and out of place. "Do you want me to have security ask them to leave?" Grace asked. I considered it, but realized this might be the perfect opportunity to end things definitively. "No. Let me talk to them." I walked outside, where my parents and Patricia waited beside Dad's car. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of their choices. "We just wanted to see," Mom said quietly, "to understand what Tyler's money became." "This is what it became," I said, gesturing toward the hospital behind me. "A research center that will help children live. A legacy of hope instead of a party that would have been forgotten in a day." Dad stepped forward, his face showing the strain of recent months. "We know we were wrong. We know we hurt you and Tyler. But we're still family, Allison. We still love you." "Do you?" I asked. "Do you love me? Or do you love the idea of having a daughter who's now connected to a prestigious medical research program? Do you love Tyler, or do you love the reflected status of having a grandson with a research center named after him?" Patricia spoke for the first time. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but seeing what Tyler's money created, seeing what his life meant to all these people, it makes me understand how wrong I was. I was so focused on my wedding, on my perfect day, that I couldn't see past my own wants to what actually mattered." "That's the first honest thing you've said in years," I replied. "I've been thinking about what you said, about some relationships not being repairable," Patricia continued. "You're right. What we did to Tyler, what we did to you, it can't be fixed with apologies. But I need you to know that I understand now why you'll never forgive us." And I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving motives. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen from her before: genuine shame and understanding of the magnitude of what they'd lost through their own choices. "The worst part," she continued, tears beginning to flow, "is that Tyler was an amazing little boy, and we missed the chance to really know him because we were so wrapped up in ourselves. I can't get that back. We can't get those years back, and now we can't even be part of honoring his memory because we gave up the right to call ourselves his family." Mom reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Please, Allison, we know we don't deserve forgiveness, but could there be a way forward? Some path to rebuilding what we destroyed?" I looked at these three people who had shaped my early life, who had given me childhood memories and family traditions, who had also abandoned their grandson in his final months and harassed a children's charity for money. They weren't monsters, but they weren't good people either. They were selfish, short-sighted individuals who had revealed their true character when tested by real hardship. "No," I said simply. "There's no way forward because you haven't actually changed. You're here because Tyler's story brought you shame and consequences, not because you've developed empathy for what he went through or what I went through. You want back into my life now that it's successful and prestigious, but you weren't interested when it was just grief and struggle. I turned to walk back into the hospital, then stopped. Tyler deserved grandparents who would show up for him unconditionally. I deserved parents who would support me during the worst time of my life. You chose yourselves instead, repeatedly and deliberately. The Tyler Research Center will save children's lives, and you'll have no part in that legacy. That's not punishment. That's just consequences. 6 months later, I stood in Tyler's room packing the last of his belongings. I was moving to a smaller house across town, one without so many memories of illness and loss. But I was carefully preserving everything that mattered: his dinosaur books, his favorite drawings, Herbert the Triceratops, and the framed photo from the Tyler Research Center dedication ceremony. The center had exceeded all expectations in its first months of operation. 3 research projects were underway, 2 families had received emergency financial assistance, and preliminary results from 1 study were already showing promise for improved treatment protocols. Tyler's legacy was saving lives, just as he would have wanted. Grace visited that weekend to help with the move. At 73, she insisted on carrying boxes despite my protests, claiming that staying busy kept her young. "Any word from your parents?" she asked, as we loaded my car with Tyler's carefully packed memories. "Nothing direct," I said. "But I heard Dad's accounting firm went out of business last month. Apparently, too many clients decided they didn't want to work with someone who'd abandon his grandson. And Patricia? Still living with them, from what I understand. Still single. Still dealing with the consequences of her choices." Grace nodded approvingly. "Good. Some people need to live with the results of their actions for a while before they develop any real character." As we drove to my new house, I reflected on the year that had passed since Tyler's death. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had transformed from a crushing weight into something more manageable, a constant awareness of loss, balanced by pride in what his life had meant. The new house was smaller but brighter, with a garden where I could plant marigolds each year on Tyler's birthday. I set up his dinosaur collection in the spare bedroom, creating a memorial space that felt more like celebration than mourning. That evening, as Grace and I sat on my new back porch watching the sunset, she brought up something I'd been avoiding thinking about. "Have you considered dating?" she asked gently. "I know it's still early, but eventually you might want to share your life with someone again." I'd thought about it occasionally, but the idea of explaining Tyler's story, of finding someone who could understand the depth of what I'd lost and what I'd chosen, felt overwhelming. "Maybe someday," I said. "Right now, I'm focused on the research center and getting settled here." "That's fine," Grace said. "But don't let your parents' betrayal close you off to the possibility that some people actually are capable of showing up when it matters." 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected phone call that would prove Grace's point. "Is this Allison, Tyler's mom?" The voice was unfamiliar, female, nervous. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Sarah Chen. My daughter Emma is 8 years old, and she was just diagnosed with the same type of leukemia Tyler had. The doctors at Phoenix Children's mentioned the Tyler Research Center and suggested I call you." My heart clenched with familiar pain and unexpected hope. "How can I help?" "Emma heard about Tyler's story, about how brave he was and how his legacy is helping other kids. She wants to know if she can be brave like Tyler was, if fighting her disease might help future kids too." I found myself smiling through tears. Tyler would love Emma's attitude. He always said that being brave wasn't about not being scared. It was about fighting anyway because it might help someone else. We talked for an hour. Sarah was a single mother, overwhelmed by the diagnosis and the treatment ahead. Her family lived across the country and couldn't provide much support. She was facing the same isolation I'd experienced, but she didn't have to face it alone. "Would you like to meet for coffee sometime?" I asked. "I can't make this easier, but I can make sure you're not going through it alone." "I would love that," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. Emma keeps asking questions I don't know how to answer. Maybe you could help me find the words. After we hung up, I walked to Tyler's memorial room and picked up Herbert the Triceratops. You're still helping kids be brave, I told him, just like you wanted. Over the following months, I became a mentor and support system for several families dealing with pediatric cancer diagnoses. The Tyler Research Center provided medical hope, but these families needed emotional support from someone who understood their journey. I found purpose in being the person I'd wished for during Tyler's illness, someone who showed up consistently, who understood the fear and exhaustion, who could offer practical help alongside emotional support. My parents never contacted me again directly, but I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. Dad had taken a job with a larger accounting firm, working as an employee instead of running his own business. Mom had withdrawn from most of her social activities, apparently struggling with the judgment from their community. Patricia had eventually found work as a receptionist, but still lived at home. Her dreams of a glamorous married life, replaced by the reality of starting over at 32 with a damaged reputation. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, but no sympathy either. They were living with the consequences of their choices, just as I was living with mine. The difference was that my choices, honoring Tyler's memory, protecting his legacy, cutting ties with people who had abandoned us, had led to purpose and peace. Their choices had led to isolation and regret. On the first anniversary of Tyler's death, I visited his grave with fresh marigolds and a photo of Emma, the little girl who was currently fighting the same battle Tyler had fought. She was responding well to treatment protocols developed through research funded by Tyler's memorial program. "You're saving lives, baby," I whispered to his headstone, "just like you always wanted to help people." The years that followed brought new challenges and unexpected joys. I helped dozens of families navigate pediatric cancer treatment, watched the Tyler Research Center expand its programs, and slowly built a chosen family of people who understood that love means showing up when it's difficult, not just when it's convenient. My parents and sister had chosen convenience over compassion, self-interest over sacrifice. They'd lost the chance to be part of something meaningful, something that would outlast their petty concerns about money and status. The Tyler Research Center continued to grow and save lives, funded by the trust money they'd tried so desperately to claim for a wedding that never happened. Their greed had cost them not just my relationship, but the opportunity to be part of Tyler's lasting legacy. I'd learned that family isn't just about blood relation. It's about who shows up in the dark times, who holds your hand through the hardest moments, who honors your loved one's memories instead of exploiting them. Tyler's real family was the doctors fighting to cure his disease, the researchers working late into the night seeking better treatments, and the parents walking this difficult path who drew strength from his story. As I reflected on my journey from that devastating phone call demanding trust money to watching Tyler's legacy transform children's cancer care, I realized that sometimes the most profound act of love is knowing when to walk away from people who don't deserve access to your heart, and using that freed space to create something beautiful for those who do.